As these mock-ups from the group Climate Central illustrate, climate change is coming for the Massachusetts coastline, and even if we dramatically cut back on greenhouse gas emissions, sea levels will continue to rise and storm flooding will worsen. That's why Governor Maura Healey, in collaboration with the state's 78 coastal communities, laid out her Resilient Coasts plan this week. It focuses on evaluating best practices, finding new funding, and updating laws to protect the state's coastline and mitigate further damage. So what will all of that look like, and what kind of impact is it going to have? I'm joined now by Lisa Berry Engler. She's director of the state's Office of Coastal Zone Management, which is leading the Resilient Coasts initiative. Lisa, thank you for being here. Appreciate the time. I know that the Office of Coastal Zone Management has been working on resiliency issues for a while already. If I'm correct, you just gave out about $8 million in grants to coastal communities that are working on resiliency strategies. So I'm wondering what this new framework that the governor rolled out and the new role that you're going to be hiring for, what will they allow you to do that you haven't been able to do already?
Thanks for that. Hello, thanks for having me today, too. So the Resilient Coast Initiative is a new way of thinking about our climate vulnerabilities along the coast. It will allow us to think proactively and comprehensively and strategically about what our vulnerabilities are coast-wide, and then think strategically about how we can share information, policy, regulatory financing mechanisms across the coast so that we can more comprehensively and really, as I said, strategically think about how we can adapt the whole coast and really get the strength of the state behind the efforts that the 78 coastal communities have been doing more on a town-by-town basis up until this point.
Along those lines, I know that one of the big tasks awaiting whoever is the head of this effort is the creation of coastal resilience districts. Can you explain to me what those are? Because when I was reading through the press release from the Healey administration, I couldn't tell if it meant areas that are contiguous geographically or areas that might be far apart but have similar geographical features or similar, perhaps, natural features in terms of biological life that give them some sort of affinity. What will constitute a coastal resilience district?
So first, I just want to say that, many of us are very familiar with the coast of Massachusetts, and we know that the coast is very diverse, right? It's also dynamic. We have areas of the coast like in Gloucester and Rockport that have more hardened shorelines. And then we also have areas of the coast that, like on the Cape and parts of Nantucket, that are more sandy and barrier beaches and dune systems. And then we also have areas of the coast that are fairly well developed, like the city of Boston and the Metro Boston area. And then we have areas that are pretty rural. And so the idea behind the coastal resilience districts is that we would be able to think, again, as I said, about looking coast-wide at what the areas of the coast, where are areas of the coast that have similarities in terms of physical characteristics, as well as infrastructure and types of development, and then also in terms of vulnerabilities to sea level rise, sea level rise, coastal flooding, erosion, even precipitation. And so where can we think about creating resilience districts that aren't necessarily contiguous, as you were saying, but share these characteristics so we can plan for how to adapt within these spaces together and use, this coast-wide vision instead of the more specific town-by-town focus.
Okay. One feature of the new program is, if I understand correctly, that the Mass Emergency Management Agency is going to be leading the evaluation of a statewide buyout program. I think, and again, tell me if I've got this right, I think that would involve managed retreat, which is something that I'm fascinated by, the idea that in some places it's probably going to make sense to pull back from the coastline, to take existing structures, move them away, to have people who are living near the coast move away. How is that evaluation program going to work, and how tough of a sell so far has the idea of managed retreat been?
Yeah, the Resilient Coast strategy is really going to think about all of the tools in the toolbox, so to speak. We're going to be thinking about different types of financing mechanisms, as I said, different types of regulatory standards, building code standards, really looking across the board at what are the things that we have to make our coast more resilient and ensure that it can continue to provide all the benefits that it currently provides to us today as a Commonwealth. And so in keeping with that, coastal buybacks are indeed something that will be evaluated, and certainly a strategy that we'll be looking to think about in participation and collaboration with the coastal communities. The work that MEMA is doing in their evaluation of a statewide buyout program will help inform those conversations that we have with our coastal communities and stakeholders. We want to know how this type of program is working in other states, and we want to know how it could work here in Massachusetts. And we want to have those answers so that when we have these conversations with our 78 coastal communities, that we can answer questions that they might have about how such a program could work in Massachusetts. You know, this is not going to be any sort of conversation that is, you must do this or you shall do this. This is providing tools so that coastal communities and stakeholders to make informed decisions about how to think about their vulnerable areas on the coast. And then I would also say that this is not a new topic for many coastal communities. We've seen a few communities, even on the Cape, that have looked at opportunities to pull back development from the coast when they've done redevelopment projects. Our Coastal Resilience Grant Program has funded 2 communities that I can think of right now where they did look at the opportunity to pull back parking lots when they were looking to redevelop them. And so we funded these projects and provided technical assistance to help them think about what are the specifics of that evaluation. How far back might you move the parking lot? What are the threats you're thinking about? What's the use, current use and future use of that parking lot in these instances? And so this is not a new topic for communities. They have been thinking about it. And so through the MEMA project and then through Resilient Coast, we'll be able to help inform the continued conversation around things like buybacks.
I want to ask you about an idea that I've heard floated as I've read and tried to learn about some of the environmental and resiliency issues facing Massachusetts over the past few years. I have heard it suggested by at least some advocates that laws that are currently on the books that are aimed at protecting coastline areas actually make it difficult to take steps that would protect them moving forward, given the new threats that they're going to be facing. Is that a dynamic that the Resilient Coasts initiative might end up delving into, and could it end up driving regulatory change if that's deemed appropriate?
So first I want to acknowledge that some of our agencies that manage the regulatory framework for development along the coast are thinking about and are in fact currently reviewing their regulatory frameworks to see how they should be updated. Some of our regulatory frameworks do not currently include the thinking of climate change and how future sea levels may change, and storm surge may change, and erosion rates may change. And so that's a process that's going on now. And that is something that will be happening in parallel to the Resilient Coast Initiative. Also, through the Resilient Coast Initiative and through the conversations and input that we'll hear from our coastal stakeholders, I suspect that we will see and hear recommendations about how we can think differently about development along the coast and supporting some of these adaptation strategies and how the regulatory framework could help support them as well. And so I see these two tracks or these types of work operating in parallel and informing each other.
Last question for you, which I know you may not be able to answer because this new initiative is just rolling out. Do you have a sense of how much money it's going to cost to do the things that we need to do all up and down the Massachusetts coastline when all is said and done? Or are we not at that point yet?
So if I had the answer to that, I would be, I don't know, I'd go to Vegas or something, right? Like this is the $1 million question, or maybe the $1 billion question, really. I mean, we know it will be expensive. That's for sure what we do know. We know that we are estimating about $1 billion in damages to coastal areas by 2070 under current conditions. So that's if nothing changes.
Yeah.
So that's sort of a rule of thumb. And so we know we need to be proactive, and we know we need to be thinking about all sources of funding to bring to bear to this issue. And so, federal, that means federal funds, it means state funds, and it means local community funds as well. We know already that we need to be taking advantage of those federal dollars and bringing them back to Massachusetts as best we can. We're already taking steps to do this. Last year, my office secured about $4 million in 2 projects to bring federal dollars to Massachusetts for coastal habitat restoration. We've also applied for funding through the Climate Resilience Regional Challenge through NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Okay, so that actually, all that info you're providing is helpful because it gives a sense of how big the threat is financially, not just existentially, and that there's multiple mechanisms out there to get the funds needed to address it. Lisa Berry Engler, thank you for talking this through. I appreciate it.
So happy to be here. Thank you for your interest, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Good luck rolling out the initiative.
Thanks.